In this episode, we talk about rare disease patients in India turning to the courts over the high cost of life-saving medicines. We also bring to you an update on the tragic Mumbai train accident that left 5 passengers dead. But first, we talk about Shubhanshu Shukla, who's set to become the second Indian to travel to space. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to 3 Things, the Indian Express news show. Today, the private US space company Axiom Space, in collaboration with NASA, is set to launch its Axiom Mission 4. The mission will carry 4 astronauts to the International Space Station, where they'll spend 14 days conducting experiments and research. Among these 4 astronauts is a 39-year-old Indian Air Force officer, Shubhanshu Shukla, who is set to become the first Indian to visit the International Space Station and only the second Indian to go to space after Rakesh Sharma nearly 40 years ago. In this segment, we are joined by the Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha, who talks about the mission and the significance Shukla's space flight holds for India. Amitabh, before we talk about Shubhanshu, tell us about this mission and the company that is undertaking it.
So the mission is being carried out by a company called Axiom Space. It's a private space company, an American company, and this is the 4th human spaceflight mission that it is doing. That's why it's called Axiom 4. The first one went in 2022. So the mission is being done by Axiom Space. It has been encouraged and facilitated by NASA, and there are astronauts of 4 different countries on board. Apart from India, there is an American astronaut, and there are astronauts from Hungary and from Poland. Apart from the American astronaut, whose name is Peggy Whitson, the rest 3 of the astronauts from India, from Poland, and from Hungary, each one of them actually represents a return by their respective countries into space travel after exactly a gap of 41 years. Each one of them actually went 40 years ago, and each one of them is now making a return. Not the astronauts, but the countries are making a return to space travel after 4 decades.
Right, and Shubhanshu Shukla is the one from India who is a part of this crew. Tell us a bit about him and how he was selected for this mission.
So, Shubhanshu Shukla was one of the 4 Indian Air Force officials selected for the Gaganyaan program. Now, our audience might be familiar with the fact that India in 2018 announced its own human space flight program. And the initial idea was that India would be able to send humans for the first time in the year 2022, which happened to be the 75th year of India's independence. And 2022, of course, did not happen, or one of the reasons being, COVID. So COVID has delayed the program. But in any case, that 2022 timeline was a very, very ambitious timeline, considering that any effort to send humans into space is several times more complicated than sending just a rocket and a spacecraft into space. So Shukla was selected as one of the 4 people, all from the Indian Air Force, to train for the Gaganyaan program. And the Gaganyaan has been delayed by a bit. I think now we are scheduled to launch the crewed Gaganyaan mission in 2027. But in the meanwhile, this new opportunity came up. It came up as a result of a new agreement between NASA and ISRO, which facilitates Indian astronauts travel to the International Space Station using NASA infrastructure and on private vehicles like those used by Axiom Space. So this new opportunity opened up in 2023, and that's how Shukla, from originally scheduled to go on Gaganyaan, is now going on the Axiom 4 mission.
And Amitabh, you mentioned that Shukla has trained for the Gaganyaan mission, and for the Axiom, he trained in Florida as well. So can you tell us what all does this kind of training involve?
So it's a very elaborate training program. Mainly, the whole idea is to familiarize yourself to live in a zero gravity situation. So most of the training is concentrated around that aspect. we are not used to living in zero gravity. And there are a lot of things that we instinctively do without realizing that those activities that we are doing, the normal lives that we live on Earth, are facilitated by the fact that there is gravity and the fact that even very, very normal, mundane things that we do would either be very, very difficult or some of them not possible to do in the absence of gravity. So that is the main thing. And of course, there are lots of other components to it, getting trained on technology, how to be safe from radiation, how to protect yourself. Then you have to be in a special suit, for example, and how to carry out your daily activities in that kind of suit. So you're confined in a space, how to float, how to do things. So those are the main things. But, if you ask broadly, what's the training about? It's about, surviving in zero gravity conditions.
And what do we know about the experiments that will be conducted as a part of this mission? And what role has ISRO played in that?
So each country has different sets of experiments that they have lined up, which are aligned to their own priorities and their own plans of space programs. So ISRO has designed a few of these experiments for itself. There are about 10 experiments that ISRO has designed, which Shukla will have to do. Most of these are biology related experiments. For example, how do plants grow certain kinds of plants? And obviously they are chosen for a specific purpose. So some sprouts, the growth of sprouts, specifically mung sprouts, again, they have been chosen for a specific purpose because there are science objectives to each one of them. Then how do certain organisms behave? What is the impact of zero gravity on them? How do their muscles react in these kind of spaces? So there is an organism called tardigrades, which is found in the oceans and which is being taken on this mission to study what the impact of space environment is on their growth. And tardigrades are supposed to be, one of the toughest survivors. They survive in very, very difficult conditions in the ocean. So, the study is about how are they able to do these kind of things? What is it that enables them to survive in very tough conditions? And space, again, is a tough environment. So that kind of an experiment. Also experiments that are relevant for human health, even on Earth, not just in space. For example, a lot of, things on Earth are associated with our weights, for example, in the sense that, very often kind of weight that you have has an impact on your bone and on your muscles, right? But it's not just the impact of weight only. They have a natural degeneration as well. And to separate the two, for example, what part of your muscle degeneration is because of a natural degeneration and what part is because of your weight or excess weight or whatever. Now that is something which is very difficult on Earth. I mean, you can't do it because you cannot separate the weight from it. In space environments, that kind of thing is possible because you take out the weight component from the equation and then you are able to see, what kind of degeneration happens in the muscles in the absence of weight. And then you would probably be able to attribute what is natural degeneration and what happens because of weight. So there are certain kind of things that can be done or done in a better way in space environments itself.
And in India, of course, there is a lot of excitement because of Shubhanshu Shukla. But what do other experts in the field have to say about this mission?
So there is a lot of excitement, no doubt. So, of course, a lot of people do see it as part of the preparations that India is doing for Gaganyaan. So it is a direct part of, again, as I said, this is an extension. So that's how most of the people in the field look at it as. The other part, of course, is the kind of experiments that we are carrying out. And people are very, very interested in the outcome of these experiments. The third part is the non-tangible part, which is this is a journey which is going to inspire a lot of young kids specifically. As I said, this happened with Rakesh Sharma as well. Everyone knew who Rakesh Sharma was, and there was a lot of excitement with Rakesh Sharma going into space. Unfortunately, people of his generation and the children who were there at that point of time, they did not have the means to, build upon that and do something with it. This time it's different because now children who would be exposed to this, they have a means to capitalize on what is being achieved. And because we have a full-fledged and a developing space program, it will attract a lot of these children into activities which might just lead them into space, or that ecosystem which supports space activities. Right now, even though we are a big space power in the sense that we have capabilities that is matched only by 3 or 4 other countries, but in terms of our participation in global space economy, that is, we still have a very small role to play in that. And this is a massive space economy. Globally, it's almost about $500 billion worth of space economy, and our contribution is just about 2% right now. So even taking it to about 10% or something, which is what we want to do, we'll need these kind of things to get more people in, to get more students interested, to the future technologists, the engineers, to get attracted to space and then get involved with space, to start contributing to these kinds of activities, which expands our space economy.
And you mentioned Rakesh Sharma. Now, he went to the space 4 decades ago on board the Soyuz T-11 spacecraft of the then Soviet Union. So why do you think it has taken us so long to undertake another mission like that?
Right. So we have not been into space in the last 4 decades, mainly because we did not have our space program of our own. As of now, only 3 countries actually have a human space program of their own. The United States, the Soviet Union / Russia. The Soviet Union had a program which has been continued forward by Russia, and lately China. So these are the only countries that have a human space program. Now, yes, we went into space in 1984 as Rakesh Sharma. Everyone knows Rakesh Sharma went into space on a Russian mission. But those kind of missions, while it's great as an inspirational story, in terms of practical value addition, it has little to add if our own space program is not very well developed. And that is what the case was in 1984. We had a very small space program at that point of time, and our priorities were very different. Our capabilities were very, very limited. As a result, what Rakesh Sharma did was, yes, it showed the kind of capabilities that Russia had, and it did a lot to inspire people, children of his generation. But, whatever he came back with, and I'm sure, during his mission also, a lot of experiments, mainly zero gravity experiments would have been performed, and he would have come back with some data. But those output at that point of time, there was no way to build upon those outputs, mainly because we did not have a very well developed space program at that time. So this particular flight, even though it is happening on someone else's mission and someone else's vehicle, this is very, very plugged into our own space program and our own plans for space in the coming years, not just for Gaganyaan. Gaganyaan is immediately relevant, but also we have our plans to set up our own space station in the next 5 years. Again, we have plans to land humans on moon by 2040. So whatever we want to do from now on into space, Shubhanshu Shukla's flight is very well plugged into our own plans. Unlike Rakesh Sharma's at that point of time, which was a one-off event, we were not in a position to take full advantage of that flight.
And now, moving on from space missions, we turn to an issue many Indians have faced for years: access to affordable and life-saving drugs. Now, this concern is even more acute for those battling rare diseases, which, while affecting small populations, often require lifelong expensive treatment. But now, some of India's rare disease patients are taking their fight to the courts. Among them is 26-year-old Seba PA from Kerala, who is urging the government to invoke a legal provision called compulsory licensing. This provision allows someone other than the patent holder to produce a medicine when it's unaffordable or in short supply. To understand this legal push and why compulsory licensing is so rarely used, my colleague Ichha Sharma speaks to the Indian Express's Anonna Dutt.
Anonna, could you start by telling us what makes rare diseases such a unique and urgent healthcare challenge in India?
So it's not just in India, it's across the world. The challenge with rare diseases is that very few people have it. It could be usually because of a genetic anomaly or certain kind of hormones are missing. Because it's just a very few people who have the disease, getting diagnosed is difficult. And even when you get diagnosed, treatment is not really available for most rare diseases. And even the ones for which it is available, the costs are extremely high because companies have to invest a lot of money to develop a drug, but there are very few takers when it comes to rare diseases.
And speaking about the specific cases that are at the center of your story, can you tell us what has happened so far and also what demands are being made?
So there are two cases that I've written about. One is a woman called Seba from Kerala. She has a condition called SMA, which is spinal muscular atrophy, a disease which basically affects the muscle functioning and the muscles become weak. And over time, a person is not able to move around. They get restricted to their beds. In this case, there are 3 drugs actually available globally. And I think it's only one drug which can be taken by adults like her for the specific kind of disease that she has. And that drug right now is available for rupees 6 lakhs per bottle. And she comes from a not very well-to-do family. She's not able to access this medicine. And so far, she was, of course, living without it. But right now, without the medicine, she has to fight for her life. So she appealed to the court to, grant her relief. And she did get some assistance. So there is the government's program called Rare Disease Policy, under which certain hospitals, not just hospital research centers that have been recognized as, rare disease institutes, they can give financial assistance up to rupees 50 lakh to a patient. But in her case, since the medicine is so expensive, she exhausted that 50 lakhs very quickly. So one of the things that she also demanded in the same court case was to ask for compulsory licensing, which essentially allows a third company to manufacture these patented drug. And, usually when this happens, the price of the drug comes down. There's also the case of this 14-year-old boy from Bangalore, who again has another rare disease called cystic fibrosis. It's thought to be much less common in India than in the Caucasian population. However, he was diagnosed very early on in his life and has to be put on this newly discovered drug called Trikafta, which was approved by the FDA in 2019. But again, the medicine is extremely costly. It's not really available in India. And when you import this medicine, it comes up to around 70 lakhs for 3 months. There is also a company in Argentina which manufactures a generic version of this drug. But even that comes up to 21 lakhs for 3 months. So it's an extreme cost. And again, patients with cystic fibrosis, like the mother of the patient that I'm talking about, have appealed to their high court that compulsory licensing should be done, even in this case.
And in your story, you write about a legal tool that's rarely used in India, that is compulsory licensing. So talk about what conditions can trigger its use.
So compulsory licensing is a provision in our Patent Act. It essentially allows another company, not the developer of a drug, to manufacture a drug. And this can only happen in certain conditions. So for example, if someone gets a patent for a medicine, but they're not, actually selling that medicine in the country for nearly 3 years. For that medicine, a compulsory license can be granted. Things like access to the medicine, whether a company is able to provide the quantity of medicine that is needed, or whether they are able to provide it at a cost which is affordable for the people of the country. These are factors that are kept in mind when compulsory licensing is issued, and it can be triggered by either a company who says that, we can manufacture this and at a cheaper cost. It can be triggered by the patients asking for it in the court, or even by the government themselves, taking notice of a situation where certain drug is not available. However, it's a provision in the Act which hasn't been used frequently. In fact, in the last 20 years, it has only been used once in 2012.
And another thing you've written about is something called process patenting, which could help lower the cost of drugs. So can you talk a bit about that and how it differs from the usual product patenting?
So basically, medicines in India were very costly after the British occupation ended. And when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, she actually set up a commission to look into what can be done to ensure that drugs become cheaper in India. So one of the recommendations was to have process patenting instead of product patenting when it came to pharmaceutical as well as foods. The difference between the two is just that in process patenting, it's only the process by which you manufacture a drug that is patented, not the drug itself. So if a company can manufacture that drug in a different method, they can do so without violating any patent norms. So that happened till about 2005 when India was forced to change its patent law as per the international requirements, mainly the TRIPS agreement that was pushed for by the United States. And that actually, the 2005 amendment actually made it mandatory to grant product patenting for pharmaceuticals as well. And the patent period actually went up from 7 years to 20 years. So that actually reduced the access of medicines in India. But, before this new Patent Act, and that's why I said that in the 20 years since 2005, when the stricter patent norms came into India, this compulsory licensing has been utilized only once. But, before the 2005 amendment, there were generic companies such as Cipla, which took on the, global pharmaceutical markets. And we are actually known for providing very cheap antiretroviral drugs for HIV to the African subcontinent. And that was possible only because Cipla could manufacture those patented drugs because they weren't violating anything at the time, because it was only process patenting was allowed at the time.
And so, Anonna, what have the pharma companies said about these demands? Like, how do they view this issue?
So, of course, if we talk about international pharmaceutical companies, they do not like it that there is a provision like this, because they say that they have invested a lot of money over the years to develop these, medicines, and they need to make up that cost. But also, when a compulsory license is triggered, it's not as if it's given for free to the other company. The other company has to pay a certain royalty to the company that has developed the medicines. However, this has never been successful because these novel molecules are developed by these big pharma companies from, across the world, and they do not want their monopoly on the drug to go. So it's a very challenging provision to trigger.
Right, but if companies here are allowed to sell alternate versions of these drugs, to what extent would that affect the prices for the patients in India?
So we have seen with several drugs that have, for which the patents have expired and they've gone on to be manufactured by the generic drug manufacturers in the country, the price drops drastically. So in the recent examples of certain diabetes medicines which went off patent, the cost went down by 90%. In fact, when it comes to one of the medicines that for which petition has been filed in court, the SMA medicine called Risdiplam. For that, Natco Pharma, which is actually wishing to manufacture the generic version, they have said that they will sell it at about 15,900 per bottle, which is right now being sold at 6 lakhs per bottle.
And Anonna, you also write about practices like evergreening. So can you tell us what that is and how it delays the access to affordable generics?
So basically, evergreening of patents is a very well-known thing in the pharmaceutical industry. And what happens is companies would make minor changes to their formulation. They would change one salt with another or make some changes to the molecule, minor changes, and they would patent that drug again, which would mean that generic manufacturers would not be able to make it. I mean, In these cases, the company does not have to show that there is a significant difference in the two formulations. However, in India, we do have a provision which prevents this evergreening of patents, whereby our law says that a product can be patented again only if there is a significant change in its efficacy or its properties with the change that the company makes to the drug.
And finally, Anonna, can you tell us what does the human cost of these medical monopolies actually look like in a country like ours?
So this is a big deal. Of course, when it comes to rare diseases, it's even more crucial because these drugs are actually very high cost ones. But even other than that, there is a significant cost to, having, and of course, it has to be a very fine balance that you have to walk, because no company would invest money in research and development unless they know that they can recoup that amount. However, having these exorbitant prices whereby the patients cannot actually afford the drug is also not something that's good. So this has to be a very fine line between, giving the pharmaceutical industry enough money while also protecting the rights of the patients.
And finally, we talk about the Mumbai train accident. At least 5 people lost their lives and 7 others were injured after several passengers fell off a moving train near Mumbai railway station in Thane yesterday morning. Sources say the accident occurred when people hanging off one train's footboard collided with the passengers clinging onto another train passing in the opposite direction. Preliminary reports suggest that a sudden jerk as the train navigated a sharp curve may have caused commuters to lose balance, crash into each other and fall off. The incident took place around 9 a.m. as a local train from Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj terminus headed toward Kasara and entered a bend just before Mumbai station. The risk, officials say, was made worse by monsoon conditions. The ground beneath the tracks softens during this season, leading to minor track misalignments and increased swaying of trains. A Central Railway spokesperson said that a formal inquiry has now been launched. In response to the accident, the Railway Board has announced that all trains being manufactured for the Mumbai suburban network will include an automatic door closing feature. Existing trains will also be redesigned to include this system. Meanwhile, Maharashtra Congress President Harshvardhan Sapkal criticized the government, blaming poor infrastructure and unmet promises over the past decade for the accident. He said the victims were failed by the system and that the tragedy reflects years of negligence and inaction. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's episode was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Ichha Sharma, Shashank Bhargava and me, Niharika Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcast and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.